Hello and welcome to the 2025 Season 3 Week 7 track guide by Team Conti Sim Performance. Michael Conti here with the NASCAR NextGen car, and we are going to go for a 30 lap run around the new Iowa Speedway. So we've got the new repave or half repave, whatever you want to call it. So different than the last time we were here, so we're going to refresh this track guide and take you on a run around here and go over all the things that are different at Iowa this season and maybe some of the things that aren't quite so different. So without further ado, we'll take off here. I think the biggest thing to note right off the bat is the tire wear. Massive, massive, massive tire wear. Massive, massive temperature leading to tire wear. So very cause and effect, if you will. Lots of temperature creating lots of tire wear. It's a little bit different than some of our intermediate tracks this season where tire temperatures have been low but the wear's been high. In those cases, managing your tires really hasn't seemed to do too much. This is going to be quite a bit different because you as the driver can really affect how much temperature you put in these tires. So whatever you can do early on to keep temperature out, so backing up corner entry, not committing to throttle so aggressively on exit, every little bit early on is going to help later. With that though, and with that said, even if you manage your tires at the absolute best of your ability, you are still not going to be able to make a full fuel run on tires or anywhere close to it. Maybe if you ran like a second off the pace every lap, maybe you could stretch tires a full fuel run. But obviously, if you're a second off a lap, multiply that by the amount of laps in a fuel run, you're going to be laps down. So it's not going to help. So if we do our typical 1 to 2/10 off methodology and just save a bit, you're probably going to make about 60 laps on tires at most. Could be less depending on track conditions, and of course dependent on how efficient you are being in saving tires. So keep that in mind. For sure, as you go through your races, as you go through your test runs, you cannot be balls to the wall driving these cars around short tracks with this tire compound. It's just not possible. If you are a real life NASCAR fan, think back to the Bristol race from last year where the tires fell apart way before a fuel run was over. That is exactly what we have this week at Iowa. So pretty interesting. It's definitely going to mix up the racing. And it's going to give people an opportunity to make passes deeper into a run because we're still going to have dirty air here this week. It's not as bad as the intermediates. Think back to Indianapolis this past week, Pocono earlier, Dover especially, terrible, terrible dirty air. Almost impossible to make a pass deep into a run. I was going to have dirty air, but luckily we do have multiple lanes here, which I'll detail in a bit. But then that speed disparity as people are at different points in their tire wear is going to open up the ability to pass, which is awesome. So as you can see here, I'm in 4th gear. This is specific to the TCSP setup. Some people might be in 5th, some people might be shifting. I think this 4th gear is perfectly fine. Hate shifting at short tracks, so anything we can do to not shift is awesome. And yeah, so just really trying to straight line brake as much as possible. A lot of free roll down into the corner and into the center. And then if you pay attention to my throttle trace, you'll see that I am not getting to full throttle until I am up onto the straightaway. Now, could I get to full throttle sooner? Absolutely. What is that going to do though? That's going to continue to spin up my right rear tire. It's going to put more heat into it. And then of course, as a consequence, it's going to wear more. So yes, I might be a little bit slow at this point in the run versus what I could do if I was pushing 10/10ths, but I'll gain all that back, plus a lot more later when I have more lap time and I can go deeper into a race because I actually have a tire on my car and it's not blown out. So talking about the stages of this tire life, so there's a couple different checkpoints I would say. I would say your first checkpoint is when the tire gets below 80%. You lose a good chunk of time, lap time that is. You get below 50%, that's when the spotter comes over the radio and says, hey, you're going to need rubber soon, or something to that effect. That's the point where you're going to lose another big chunk. And then it pretty much will plateau after 50 until you get to 10% tire wear. When you get to 10%, the tire falls off a cliff, lap times fall off a cliff, and you will quickly blow out a tire soon thereafter. When you blow out a tire, you get a meatball flag, you'll hear a really loud, terrible noise coming from the under body of the car. That's the tire flapping around the wheel well, and at that point you have to pit. So keep that in mind as you're going throughout your runs. Listen to the spotter, keep an eye on the lap time fall off, and that will give you a good indication of where your tire degradation is. So talking a little bit more about the track versus the tires now, you'll see that I've concentrated most of the beginning of this run on the bottom. And like it's always been on here, just rolling around the bottom in a very tidy, efficient manner will manage the tires the best. Now at some point in the race, sooner than later, you'll have to move up. And when you do, you've got plenty of options. This whole dark new asphalt patch at both ends has a lot of grip. Okay, as soon as you get out of that patch, you'll begin to lose grip and lose grip quickly. So do not run outside of the dark asphalt. Like right there, I kind of got my right rear on that transition, and you can see me just hemorrhage lap time in the middle of the corner. So right now in a clean track at this point in the run, your bottom is definitely quickest. I like to put my left front right on that sealer seam next to the white line. A lot of grip down there. Get onto the white line if I can in 3 and 4. Way better lap time running the bottom right now. But as tires wear out, as the track rubber's in, as people begin to migrate to the bottom, you're going to have to move around. And when you do, you've got plenty of options. Really easy to spin the tires late exit as you come off of turn 2. There's a bunch of bumps right there that the underbody seems to interact badly with, so just be careful with that. And that goes back to just not committing to 100% throttle until you're well off the corner. Helps keep some of that in check. And right there, kind of lands onto the straightaway and it compresses the back really hard. 3 and 4s, like it's always been, much smoother, but still this late exit right there. Got a little bit of a transition from corner to straightaway, and there's a good bump right there as well. Bumps into turn 1, you can probably see it in my steering wheel or even on the screen. A lot of bumps into 1 still. So they repaved this track. You know, they really didn't smooth it out totally. They still left some of that character, which is really nice. But yeah, anytime I get off the bottom right here, I'm just much slower, so concentrate on running the bottom for most of the rest of this run. Maybe get back up there around 25, see if anything's happening. I can change up my approach running the bottom though, so right there a little bit of a higher entry, slowed down center more to cut it back down and get a nice straight exit. Still front limited there, so started to lose the right rear as I came up off. So you front limited to that snap loose condition. That's the thing here, if you get on the throttle too soon and you start washing out, you got all this wheel into it, and then once the corner is over and you transition to the straightaway, it wants to just snap loose. So really have to be careful with how much wheel you've got in it with your throttle. Working on lap 20 right now. Pretty neutral, like I said. A little front limited, but you're going to probably want to be a bit tight, because if you're loose, you're going to be in for a world of hurt later in the run. Good corner right there. Did much better, just bleeding off some center speed, not shoving the front. Was able to carry a little bit more roll past the center. Right there, just missed the white line by a touch and lost that little bit that I gained in 1 and 2. This is the part of the run where the lap time should pretty well plateau if you've managed to this point. If you really start to fall off from 20 to 30, you're probably not going to make 60 laps. Typically, Iowa races, you're talking A-Open, NIS, they either go one of two ways. Either they're super clean and you get really basically no cautions, or they're absolute disasters and you can't go more than 5 laps. So if it's the latter, obviously tire management's really not going to make a difference. At that point, maybe somebody with a little bit of a looser car is going to prevail because they can fire off better. But if you get one of those Iowa races with a long run, you know, that loose car or just that car that's harder on tires in general is really not going to be good later on. Right here, just managing the grip, managing the throttle, slow rolling around the bottom, very patient. Get to my max wheel lock at apex, then slowly start to unwind. A little bit of a lower exit off of 4 right there. I find that helps the car interact with those bumps better. Same thing with 1 and 2, just a little lower exit later in the run. Right there you can see, just keep a little bit more grip. It's like the sooner you get off that bottom, you start getting up the track, you start losing grip, and you just lose that time. So just keeping it a bit more pinched than you typically would works pretty well. Try to run back up top again here. I really don't foresee this working, and I can already tell it's not good. Not as bad as earlier in the run, but still, if I go do that same thing in 3 and 4, I'm going to be at least 3/10 off. So track is definitely not wide by yourself, but again, I do think it will open up as the race goes on. That's what we saw in the Coke race that happened right after the build, and I think we'll see that here as well. But back to the bottom, slow roll around the bottom, good grip on exit, do the same thing in 3, get it turned down to the white line, a little bit off the white line, but close enough, and back into the 5s. You can see I'm not charging the corners hard. I don't think I'm really moving the wheel around that much. I've got my little movements center off just to test the grip, correct the rear. Talked about that in great detail over the last several videos, but really no big movements, and that's the key. You can move the wheel around plus or minus 5, 6, 7 degrees. You don't want to be chopping at it. That's no good. A little deep into 1 right there. Missed the bottom, and then that completely sacrifices my exit, as you can see right there. Try to get myself set up for a good 30, and then we'll do a pit road entry. And 1 more lap right here. I lose a little bit on entry, but I get it turned down. I throttle up. Good grip, good forward momentum. Half a tenth in the green. Down into 3. There we go. Hook that white line. Good drive up off, a little bit wide, so going through the bumps right there, gave a little bit back, but still a 54 and 30. Pretty representative right there. That's pretty nice. That time is going to be affected by how hard you drive early, so just bear that in mind. Alright, so going into pit road here, green flag pit road entry. We'll enter turn 3 like I typically would. Start downshifting pretty early on. Right at about this middle point in the corner, get it slowed down and get it turned down. And there you go, 40 miles an hour at pit road entry, and we're good to go. As you can see there, that comes up really quickly, so just really be careful with that. Again, the likelihood that you will have a green flag pit stop here is minimal, but just in case, if that's how you do it, we'll do a quick pit stop. Pit road exit, and then we'll get outside of the car. All the damage is repairable, but I have no damage, so that's interesting. If anybody knows what that is, let me know. I've never seen that before. All right, here we go. So jack drops, bog it down, try not to spin the rears, 40 miles an hour. Okay, up to second. Watch the bumps down here. To third, clear the cone, fourth, and so on and so forth. Okay. Nice little 30, pit in, pit out. We're good there. Let's go ahead and get outside the car and take a look at some of these laps. It's probably going to be a bit shorter than usual because not too much changes as you go throughout the run, so you can really look at this hot lap on the bottom and focus on that. So hopping outside the car here. try to pinpoint some lift points, turn in, where we need to place the car, etc. And we'll do that at both ends of the track. We're going down the straightaway, as always. You make sure you're tight to that wall. Obviously this is kind of like it's a curved front straightaway, right? That goes without saying. Similar shape to Richmond, and because of that, a lot of people struggle with when to start getting off the wall, where to turn in, how to brake. Some some turn in too early and are way too shallow, and then pinch the center. Some turn in way too late and never have a chance to get down to the bottom. So we'll try to give you some tips and tricks to pick a spot and turn in. So going into one, up next to the wall. I'm already starting to turn off. Already turning off the wall way back here. Corner entries here. There's the new asphalt in turn one. I'm already turning off the wall. Now where am I turning off the wall? Hy-Vee Perks 250 sign. That's basically it. Now can you see that from inside the car? Probably not so well. So let's look at some things that we can see and think about as we pass them and say, okay, I just passed this, so now I have to turn in. Start finish line, caution light. So we get past that, and I start turning in maybe if we put car lengths on it, I don't know, maybe 3 car lengths, 2.5, 3 car lengths past the start finish line. I think that'd be a pretty good reference point. Again, there's really nothing on the wall, banners or signage to tell you, hey, you can turn in exactly here. So just understand that you're going to pass the start finish line, and then 2.5 to 3 car lengths later, you're going to start easing the car off the wall. Easing it off the wall, still while full throttle. Now eventually I'm going to start to lift here. It's going to be a quick lift to brake. There you go. Immediately on the brake. Yeah, we look at that brake pressure there. And in terms of actual percentage, probably looking at about 20% or so, give or take. And that's pretty consistent at both ends, about 20% of brake early in the run. That'll probably increase slowly as your grip falls off as you go. About 20% brake initially, and you're gonna trail brake into and through the entry of turn one. As you can see right here, this transition from old to new asphalt, big bump, big bump. You can really feel that from within the car. It's a really hard lateral bump, so you're swinging the car side to side. It's almost porpoising at that point. Lots of oscillations. That's where setup is going to come into play. Really, really stiff setup might control the platform better. You might have a harder time getting it to ride over this transition, whereas a softer setup might take this transition better but lose in other places because you lose that aero balance. So just quick setup philosophy there. That's the pros and cons of stiff versus not so stiff. Anyway, so we go over this transition here, dealing with these bumps, still have about 10 to 15% brake into it, and all the while still turning down to this bottom. As I hit the transition, I want to make sure that the right side of my car is below the top of this new pavement. If I'm out here turning in, my right front is going to interact with that old, less grippy pavement, and I'm going to have no turn, no speed. So I have to make sure that when I get to this patch that I am in this patch and not up here. So in the patch, still turning down, sustaining that 10 to 15% brake, still turning down, slowly rolling off the brake down to about 5%, and finally completely off the brake, right past the Ruoff mortgage signage on the wall. That's a good reference point there. Off the brake, like I talked about, really want to be on this dark patch right here or the white line. Get the left front down there, grip it up, and then go. Do I ever get down there? Almost. Almost. I would like to be a little bit lower. If I can throttle up while the left front at least is on this dark asphalt, that really helps me launch up off of 2 with a lot of good lateral grip. I missed it just a bit, so a little bit of an opportunity there to do better, but overall pretty good corner. So free roll all the way from the Ruoff mortgage signage to past the end of the pit wall, still free rolling and just getting on the throttle. So off the brake at the rear off signage, on the throttle just past the pit out cone, and then you'll see here as I increase throttle, I'll slowly decrease wheel, trying not to put too much throttle into it too soon, keeping the car nice and tied down to the bottom. Plateaued at about 75 to 80% throttle there. And now I start to bring it off the bottom, well past center, approaching the 3/4 mark of the corner, driving it straight up off the corner with very little wheel input, about 80% plateaued throttle. Reduce throttle a little bit right there just to settle the rear. Could feel that rear maybe stepping out just a bit. A little wheel correction right there, and just about right there, I begin to get to my 100%. You can see all goes together. Whoops. All goes together. So if we play in slower motion here, you'll see throttle comes out, then throttle back into it. Big correction right there, and then once I correct it, bang, I can get into the throttle 100%. That's all those small wheel movements you'll notice off the corner, whether you're watching my wheel in the video or maybe you're a subscriber and looking at the data every week and looking at my wheel traces. Those are those little oscillations you see in the wheel traces. It's not one of these, again, it's just little movements to settle typically the rear of the car on corner exit. So that's 1 and 2. Looking at 3 and 4, tighten the wall. Similar to 1 and 2, turning off the wall well before the entry. This is a straight entry into 3 here. This wall is straight. There's no curve. But you still want a straight line brake. Really helps you get into the corner. Much easier without slipping the rear. So straight line braking at both ends is key. Same into 3 here. So turning off the wall, 100% throttle. And then finally getting off the throttle a few car lengths after I've initiated my turn in. Where is this happening on the track? A little bit past the end of the Iowa Speedway sign. So the turn in starts right at the end of this Iowa Speedway sign, and the lift and braking starts probably similar to 1, about 3 car lengths after. Lift, get onto the brake, 20% brake. Make sure that you're in this fresh patch of asphalt as you load into the corner. Not as much of a bump right there, just a slight bump. All the way down to the bottom. Really hold this brake right here. Aggressive trail braking, a little bit less roll speed. To a free roll. Really no markers on the wall here. There's an Iowa sign. You're going to get off the brake at the Iowa sign. At the end of it, rather. You're going to free roll all the way around here. You get that left front right on this white line, or at least in between the white line and that first light colored seam right there. Free roll, and then back on the gas. There's no marker for that. Back on the gas, several car lengths after you've initiated your free roll. Really, really, really be patient. Let it roll. Make sure the nose is turned, and then begin to work throttle. Progressively banked corners at both ends. You can really feel it in 3 and 4. Excuse me. There are no markers on the track to delineate the lanes now, but pretty much this seam right here is important because as you go above that seam, you've got quite a bit more banking than what you have below it. Just to reiterate one more time, do not run outside of the asphalt. That will be slow. There is more banking up here, but the asphalt has so much less grip that it does not matter. And then, so working the center of 3 and 4, plateaued at that 70-ish% throttle. And then I'll work the wheel, reduce throttle, correct the wheel, reduce throttle, correct the wheel, rinse and repeat. And then as I get to the straightaway, I'll finally get to full throttle well on the straightaway. I mean, we're talking, I am not full throttle until I'm past the restart zone because I've got all of these big bumps right in here. See that right there? Boom, boom. And the higher up you are to the wall, the harsher that is. That's why that lower exit is a little bit better in keeping the rear settled there. So that's how to get around the track. Let's look at the pit in and quickly pit out, and that'll be it. So into 3 right here, same entry. Gonna downshift into 3rd right there. And then you'll see I let it drift off the bottom a little bit because I want to get an angle so I can be as straight as possible off this banking. Very, very typical to any, well, 95% of the ovals we go to. Same entry philosophy. I drive it up the track a little bit. That gives me a bit more time to bleed off speed. It also is going to help my angle off the track. Depending on where you are in the race, do you have traffic around you? Are there cars coming? You may or may not be able to do this, but in a perfect world, you could open up this entry. Down to second right there. And this is where it gets tricky. So big turn from the middle of the track to the bottom. And if we look at it, I'm fairly headed straight on here. It's kind of hard to tell with the camera angle this way, but I'm pretty lined up for pit road. But still exiting, left front is hitting first, then right front, then the back is going to compress, so that transition is going to be pretty harsh. As you can see right there, big correction. 40 mile an hour pit road speed. I'm going to hit the line at 50, but slow it down quickly enough to where I can get to 40 and be good. Pretty aggressive right there. Again, would not recommend doing that in a race because you probably don't need to get 12 tenths out of it there, but that is at least the idea anyway, as far as lift points, entry angle, etc. Then we go down pit road. Just a PSA, please don't be one of those people that cuts the pit road so much that they're driving in the boxes. You can be protested for that, but even if you're not protested, it's just really annoying and it's frustrating. So just be a decent person and drive where you're supposed to. I mean, technically, you're not even really supposed to be in this lane in the corner. You're supposed to be to the outmost lane if you're not pulling into your box, but we'll give you this. This is okay. You drive in there, and again, you're at risk of protest or just being that guy that nobody likes because you're driving through the boxes and can't see where your box is, and it's just super annoying. So don't do that. I'm going to make a pit stop right here. Be careful with the wheel spin on exit. Big bumps right after the exit line right there. Be careful. If you hug this inside wall too much, it's really bumpy. You're probably going to crash. So make sure you give yourself a bit of berth. Run right in the middle here. Nice straight exit. Onto the track. Make sure you're not hot merging in front of people. And that's pretty much it. So yeah, so I think that's about as in detail as we need here for Iowa. As you can see, a lot has changed since last season. On top of that, we have a brand new short track package on this car with new aero and tire than we had last year. So overall, not much is different at this track. Your straight line braking being super important, making sure you don't rush throttle, center off, all that's the same, but basically everything else is different. So good luck in your races this week. Hopefully they're clean. We've had a bit of a rough start to this new build. A lot of caution-filled races, so let's all try to take care of each other, be clean, get to the finish, and have some good results. So thank you so much for watching. Appreciate your support of the channel, and we'll see you next time.